Today on the show, we're going to be looking at the Persona series. If you didn't know that the Velvet Room is actually owned by a person named Philemon, then this video is for you. So we're going to start off at the beginning with Revelations Persona, or Shin Megami Tensei Persona. Now, this game was actually a bit of a game changer for the Shin Megami Tensei series, because it featured a group of contemporary teenagers using firearms and melee weapons. It was also a bit of a game changer for RPGs as a whole in the mid-90s. You see, back then, most RPG games had a medieval setting, and it was rare to come by a game that didn't have that medieval setting. So as was common in the mid-90s, there were a lot of aesthetic and gameplay changes to the game when the game came over to the US. A good example of this is that a lot of the characters were actually renamed. For example, Maso became Mark. Also, the main character was redesigned. His hair was made slightly lighter and his ear piercing was removed. When it came to gameplay changes for the US version, the US version was considerably easier. You see, there were less enemy encounters, but to balance this per battle, you got more EXP. Also, another change is that wherever yen was mentioned in the game, it was changed to dollars. It is, however, worth noting that most, if not all of these changes, were removed in the PSP version in 2010. So the game was released September 1996 in Japan, and November 1996 in North America. The game, however, would not hit Europe until 2010 because of the PSP release. This is largely due to the fact that Atlus doesn't actually have a European office, so their EU releases tend to be a bit erratic in their release dates if their games do make it over here at all. So unlike current titles in the Persona series, in this game there was no such thing as the wildcard ability. In fact, all of your party members could be equipped to up to 3 personas at any given time. You got stronger personas by negotiating with enemy demons, and they would give you spell cards. You fuse these spell cards in the Velvet Room to get more powerful personas. The communication with enemy demons is of course a trait that this game shared with the mother Shin Megami Tensei series. However, in Persona 3 and Persona 4, the communication was replaced by the social link system. So, Revelations Persona starts off in St. Hermelin High. A group of high school students have boarded off a classroom and they're playing a game called Persona that allows you to see your future self. A boy named Mark has bet someone called Brown that the game will fail, which of course it probably will. So they play the game and it looks like Mark has won. However, a girl in white then appears and she attacks the team with lightning. Next thing, the protagonist, Naoya, wakes up in a room with a person called Philemon, and Philemon asks for Naoya's name. This room, of course, is the Velvet Room. Next thing, Naoya wakes up in the school infirmary, and the teacher says, all of you should go to the hospital to get checkups. And the nurse is like, why don't you visit your friend Maki, because she's actually ill and in the hospital. So the party head on over to the hospital. The game would continue from there to the point where the characters would awaken their persona, there would be a fake Maki and a real Maki and travel between parallel dimensions, and it would be really hard to follow, and it would need its own video so I could explain it properly, so we're just gonna kind of brush over it here. It is worth mentioning, however, that this game introduced the concept of shadow selves. Now obviously these shadow selves were not the same as the shadow selves in Persona 4, but it is interesting to see how the idea evolved. This game also had a party that consisted of 9 people. All 9 people would play an important part of the storyline if you played the game correctly. It's super effective! Now, Persona 2. Persona 2 was actually split up into 2 games, Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment. And once again, we will not be going into detail about either game's storyline, however, there are quite a few key details worth mentioning about each of these games. So, Persona 2. Persona 2 was actually quite a game changer for Atlus as a whole, because they were the first games that Atlus released that were done 100% in the third person. Also, whereas Persona 1 drew quite heavily from the occult as a whole, Persona 2 drew quite heavily from H.P. Lovecraft, which of course is a very niche area of the occult. So Innocent Sin takes place 3 years after the first Persona game. One of your party members, Yukino, actually returns in Innocent Sin, fully knowledgeable and experienced in using Persona. So this game starts with the main character's path intertwining with 2 other students called Ekichi and Lisa, and they also encounter a being called the Joker. Now the Joker is actually this being said to grant you 3 wishes if you dial a certain cell phone number. After you dial this number, you have to make these 3 wishes, otherwise he takes away your ideal energy. This energy is of course what keeps you human and keeps your ambition alive. And once that's taken away, you become just like a shell of a person. Now when the 3 students don't recognize the Joker after he claims that they did something to him in the past, he swears revenge on them and runs away with this weird crystal skull. Now, Eternal Punishment takes place in a parallel world a few months after Innocent Sin, where the events of Innocent Sin never happened. You once again play a silent protagonist, this time a girl called Maya, and she is the editor for a teen magazine called Coolest, and she's investigating these series of murders from a serial killer called Joker. Now, victims of these murders apparently get a note saying, "You're next," before they die. And while investigating another case at Seven Sisters High School, a murder brings her roommate, and a police detective together to solve this case. As you can tell, these games were quite a big departure from the first Persona game, and it kind of had the feel of Persona, but kind of had the feel of Shin Megami Tensei, but it didn't really stand out, and it wasn't exactly independent, which is why we're not really going into the storyline. So the reason the game never made it to the US wasn't actually because of any licensing rights, it was because there was a homosexual relationship, and there was also an appearance of Adolf Hitler. Of course, these were things that you would have never have seen in the 90s. I mean, just look at Sailor Moon and what they did to the lesbians that became cousins. It's super effective! Okay, so now we're on to Persona 3 and Persona 4. Now, the link between these 2 games was much stronger than that of Persona 1 and Persona 2, and I think this all comes down to the Velvet Room, because the characters in that largely remain the same and mention the other characters and throw hints out about, Persona 3 in Persona 4, so it's quite interesting to see the way that evolved. Also, in Persona 4 Arena, you see all the characters on the same screen at once, which of course you do not get to see in Persona 1 and Persona 2. Also, these 2 games weren't as dark as the first 2 Persona games, but I think this did the series well because it kind of became like a dating sim meets RPG, and it really married the 2 genres really well and created something that's a unique experience that you just can't find anywhere else. So we're going to start by looking at Persona 3, and we're going to follow the storyline of Persona 3 FES, which means we won't really be looking at the female protagonist from Persona 3 Portable, just because her storyline isn't really considered canon, but it is a nice feature in Persona 3 Portable. The storyline isn't considered canon because in Persona 3 Portable there's no FES chapter, and there has to be an FES chapter for Aigis to recognise Elizabeth in Persona 4 Arena. So, Persona 3 was released July 16th, 2006, and FES was released less than a year later in April 2007. Persona 3 was the first game in the Persona series to feature the social link system, which is what the series has largely become known for. It was also the first game to not really change anything in the US release. Okay, there are a few bits of dialogue here and there that would have made no sense in English, and that was usually due to a joke. However, in that case, the joke was changed to a Western parallel that would have still been funny but would have also made sense in English. The city itself is an artificial island created by the Keijo group. Also, this was the corporation that 10 years ago were holding experiments on the island and accidentally created something called the Dark Hour. Now, the Dark Hour is this period of time that's between one day and the next, and most people turn into coffins in the Dark Hour, but some people are still conscious, and shadows prey the streets, trying to find conscious people to attack. Also, Gekugan High School, which is the school that most of the characters attend, turns into this giant tower called Tartarus. Now, shadows are these creatures that prey the streets, trying to find people that are still conscious in the Dark Hour, and they attack those people's minds. To investigate the Dark Hour, SEES was created. Now Seas is this group of high school students that have the ability to summon persona. They summon their persona by shooting this gun-like object called an invoker at their head. So Persona 3 begins with the protagonist transferring to Gekugan High. Upon arriving in his dorm rooms, he is asked to sign something by a child, and that child then disappears, and he turns around and sees this girl that has a gun aimed at him, and he also meets the dorm room leader, and the dorm room leader manages to talk down the girl that has said gun aimed at him, and he is escorted up to his bedroom. He is of course asked not to mention the gun. Next day he goes to school with Gun Girl, whose name turns out to be Yukari Takeba, and he also meets classmate Junpei Iori. When he comes home, he meets the leader of Seas, Shuji Ikutsuki, and the student council president, which is also the leader of the dorms, Mitsuru Kurijo. She of course is the daughter of the owner of the Kurijo group. So Seas carries out these strange operations in the midnight hour, and at first it looks like they're spying on the protagonist, but then one night Akihiko, another dormmate, runs home and says that he's running from a shadow. Yukari comes and wakes up the protagonist, and they both run to the rooftop where they are attacked by the Magician Arcana shadow. The protagonist awakens a persona called Orpheus to defeat it, and that's all well and good, but then Orpheus turns into Thanatos. So the protagonist passes out after all of this, and when he wakes up, he is in the Velvet Room. A man called Igor and his assistant Elizabeth are in the Velvet Room, and they explain to him that the Velvet Room is a place that's between unconsciousness and consciousness, and in this room they can create new persona for him because he has the unique ability to summon multiple persona. Eventually the protagonist wakes up in the school infirmary, and it's a solid week later. He goes back to the dorm and it's explained to him that what he saw was a shadow. The group Seas operates in the midnight hour to destroy shadows, and he is asked to join Seas. The protagonist agrees to join, and soon after, Junpei joins, much to the dismay of Yukari, who refers to Junpei as Stupei. Mitsuru takes the party to Tartarus. She explains that Tartarus is normally Gekugan High in the day, but in the midnight hour it turns to this tower that's essentially a nest for shadows. The party battle their way through the tower till they eventually reach a block, and they cannot go on any further. Eventually the full moon comes about, and the party have to battle the priestess shadow, who tries to destroy this monorail car. After they defeat the priestess, the barrier in Tartarus is lifted. So eventually a girl called Fuka is locked in the school gym, and the school turns into Tartarus, trapping Fuka there. And eventually the Empress and Emperor shadows begin to take away people that bullied Fuka. Eventually the party manage to save Fuka and save the bullies. Fuka then awakens her own persona, and the party manages to defeat the Empress and Emperor shadows. Fuka then takes over the support role from Mitsuru, meaning Mitsuru can now join you in battles, which her persona was made for. Once again, the party battle their way up a tower to a blockade. Once the next full moon comes about, the Hierophant shadow and the Lover shadow tries to use mind control on the party in a love hotel. Fortunately, the party is able to break free of the mind control and defeat the two shadows. Eventually summer break comes about, and Mitsuru takes Seas to her family's vacation home on a nearby island. Takeharu Kurijo, Mitsuru's father, shows a video to everyone of Yukari's father, who says, "The 12 shadow arcanas must be defeated." Yukari, obviously upset that her father has something to do with what's going on, runs to the beach. The protagonist chases after her and comforts her. They begin to hug, and Junpei turns up to clock block. So on the second day of the vacation, the three boys begin to hit on girls at the beach. They fail each time, and one of the girls is a little bit too spicy for them. Meanwhile, Fuka, Yukari and Mitsuru go on a walk through the forest, and they are told that an anti-shadow weapon had escaped from the Kurijo group lab. Back at the beach, the boys encounter a girl in a blue dress who's called Aigis, who rejects Junpei and Akihiko, but says she wants to be by the protagonist's side. She then runs off into the forest. The three boys and the three girls manage to catch up with Aigis, and Ikutsuki explains that Aigis is the anti-shadow weapon. She was modelled after a human so she could have her own persona. Back on the main island, Akihiko's friend, Shinjiro, gets drugs from this group called Strega, and Strega opposes Seas in stopping the Dark Hour. During the next full moon, the party encounters Strega and find out exactly what Strega are up to. Turns out they run a website called Revenge Request, where people request murders of people, and Strega operate by going about removing people from their protective coffins in the dark hour and leading them to the shadows. The party then defeat the Chariot and the Justice Shadows in an underground World War II facility. They also find a dog called Konohamaru, who is protecting his owner's shrine from shadows, and he awakens his own persona. The party then learn that the owner has been dead for a while, and the dog has been waiting at the shrine ever since. While all this was going on, the party battled their way up Tartarus to another blockade. Eventually a film festival comes about, and the protagonist meets a grade schooler called Ken. He can also summon a persona. Eventually he joins the party along with Shinjiro. The party head for the local nightlife club escapade after the Hermit Shadow causes a power outage. Strega then take Junpei hostage, and Junpei manages to convince Chidori, the Strega member that took him hostage, to let him go. C's then take Chidori hostage. Ken confronts Shinjiro about his mother's death, and it turns out that Shinjiro's persona went berserk and actually killed Ken's mother. This is why Shinjiro left C's to begin with. Ever since then, Shinjiro has been taking persona suppressants, which were supplied by Strega. Turns out that Strega were part of the experiments the Kinjiro Corporation were running 10 years ago on artificial persona. Turns out that artificial persona would kill the user if they did not take suppressants. Ken, finding all this out, tries to kill Shinjiro. Shinjiro manages to defend himself, but then Takaya, the leader of Strega, turns up and kills Shinjiro instead. At Shinjiro's funeral, Akihiko is so upset that his persona evolves from Polydeuces into Caesar. Akihiko then reveals that he and Shinjiro grew up in the same orphanage along with Akihiko's sister Miki. Miki actually died in a fire, and that's why Akihiko is obsessed with becoming strong, because he wants to prevent death wherever possible. Ken's persona, Nemesis, then evolves to Kala Nemi when he resolves to live life for Shinjiro and his mother. Fuka's persona then evolves to Juno when she finds out that her best friend is moving away. The final shadow then reveals itself, the Hanged Man, and at this point the party are able to make quick work of it. Mitsuru then promises the party a feast to celebrate. Also, remember that little boy I mentioned at the beginning of the game? Well, he has been appearing off and on and communicating with the protagonist. Turns out his name is Pharos. Now after this, he appears one last time and says goodbye to the protagonist. An important thing to note about the little boy is that every time he's turned up, he's been talking about how the end is getting closer, the end is drawing near. And this obviously leaves the protagonist confused every single time, but the protagonist never asks, "What the hell are you talking about?" Mitsuru's father, Takeharu, turns up to congratulate C's on their achievement. But then it turns out the midnight hour is still happening. So obviously the party is like, what the hell is going on? So they go to Tartarus to see if they can find anything. And they do. They find Aigis with Ikutsuki standing at Tartarus. Turns out Ikutsuki manipulated the party into defeating the 12 shadows. Turns out, by defeating the shadows, this allows them to reunite with the shadow that they came from, death. So Ikutsuki has reprogrammed Aigis, and she makes quick work of the party, which allows Ikutsuki to crucify the party onto Tartarus. Ikutsuki and Takeharu then shoot at each other, and Takeharu is hit, and he dies, leaving Mitsuru parentless. Finally, Ikutsuki tries to kill the party once again, but he forgot about Konohamaru, who turns up and manages to defeat Ikutsuki, who then drives off to Tartarus to his death. Since Ikutsuki was kind of operating C's this whole time, the party don't really know what to do next. Clearly there's still an issue of the midnight hour, but they can't press it any further, so they're just kinda like... Fuka then gives Yukari a tape that she found on Ikutsuki's computer. Turns out the tape that they saw at the beach mansion was actually heavily edited. The tape originally talks about Mitsuru's grandfather wanting to experiment with death and shadows, and Yukari's father turned out not to have much to do with what's going on after all. Yukari's persona then evolves from Io to Isis. The following day, a boy called Ryoji Mochizuki transfers to the protagonist class, and Aigis hates him straight away. Yukari and Ryoji manage to convince Mitsuru to authorize a class trip to Kyoto, as of course Mitsuru is the student council president. When they go to Kyoto, it is revealed that Yukari is originally from Kyoto. Turns out Yukari and her mother moved away from Kyoto because Yukari's mother wanted to find a new boyfriend. Mitsuru's persona then evolves from Penicilla to Artemisia. One fun night, Akihiko, Ryoji, Junpei and the protagonist are nearly caught trying to spy on the girls in the hot springs. Meanwhile, back at Tatsumi, turns out that Takeya and Jin are still alive and they take Chidori back. On the steps to Tartarus, Chidori goes insane and Takeya shoots Junpei. Junpei then dies. Unfortunately, Chidori sees this and uses her healing powers to bring him back, but at the cost of her own life. Junpei realizes what happened and his persona evolves from Hermes to Trismegistus and he begins to attack Strega. The enemies only manage to escape with the cunning use of a smoke bomb. The following full moon, Aigis and Ryoji are on the Moonlight Bridge reminiscing about what happened 10 years ago. So it turns out that Ryoji is the little boy that was appearing before the protagonist, Pharaohs, and he was able to escape when he was able to unite with the 12 Shadow Arcanas. Turns out 10 years ago, he and Aigis fought, and the 12 Shadow Arcanas were separated from him, and he was sealed inside of the protagonist, and this led to the accident that caused the protagonist's parents' death. Ryoji turns out to be the herald of Nyx. Now, Nyx is a being that just cannot be defeated, so Ryoji gives the party the option of killing him to make their deaths painless. Cease is given till the next full moon to make their decision. This is also known as the most boring month in the game! Aigis' persona then evolves from Palladian to Athena. The time comes for Cease to fess up their decision, and they decide to let Ryoji live, regardless of the fact that Ryoji turned into Thanatos. The party say that they are going to find a way to fight Nyx. Life from here continues as normal as physically possible, and Akihiko takes the party out for ramen. While out for ramen, it turns out that an end-of-the-world cult has been started by Strega. Next, the party climbs Tartarus on January 31st. This, of course, is the day that Nyx is supposed to arrive. I really feel that not putting it on December 25th is a missed opportunity, because we could call her Bad Old Saint Nyx. They defeat Jin, who sacrifices himself to stop the oncoming shadows from the lower floors, and then they defeat Takeya. Then they make it to the top floor and they find Ryoji. Ryoji has transformed to Nyx's avatar, and he does say that he's enjoyed his time with everyone, but he does have to end the world now. Yes. Exactly like that. It is really weird. Party defeat Nyx's avatar, but then Nyx makes really quick work of the protagonist. The protagonist then wakes up in the Velvet Room, and Igor is able to use the social links the protagonist has made over the past year to create the Universe Arcana. Now, the Universe Arcana isn't strong enough to create a persona, but it is strong enough to allow the protagonist to become a seal between the world and Nyx. Next thing we see is life has returned to normal, but the party have lost their memories of the past year. They barely even recognize one another. The protagonist turns up to fulfill his promise to meet up with everyone on graduation day. Aigis knocks on his door and the two go to the school's rooftop. On the graduation day, Mitsuru tells everyone that her father died of sudden illness, but she doesn't believe this herself. Aigis on the rooftop tells the protagonist that she is going to try and live as a human, even if it means crying. Suddenly, one by one, everyone's memories return to them, and they run up onto the school's rooftop, just in time to see the protagonist's soul slip away from his body to become the Great Seal.
I remember. Yes. With my father's death, I lost my purpose in life.
Hang on. Wasn't I supposed to? Akihiko-senpai. What's up?
Sit down, you two.
But now, I have something to live for. No longer will I run from the future. I will face it head on. Carrying out my father's will, I am resolved, and without reservation.
Promise.
I owe it all to my invaluable friends. And we have promised to never lose hope, no matter what tomorrow may bring.
Senpai, we made a promise. Let's find him. And I guess too.
Yes, I can hardly wait. Everyone, let's go!
The wind feels so nice. This is my first time experiencing spring. But this season will eventually pass. After fighting alongside you and facing the world's end, I finally began to understand what it means to live. Thinking for yourself, not running away. Accepting the inevitable. All things eventually come to an end. Every living thing will one day disappear. Only by accepting this can one discover what they truly want. What the meaning of their life will be. I understand now why I was so tormented by my lack of strength. Protecting others became more than just an order I had to obey. I wanted to do it for my own reasons. I realized this once I decided to try and prevent the fall. When I thought I might never see you again, something else became clear to me. What I wanted most. And so, I made up my mind. I decided that I would continue to protect you. I want to be your strength. I know I'm not the only one who can do this, but that's okay. My life will be worth living if it's for this reason. Thank you. You're right. What am I doing? I understand now. So I should be happy.
Hey!
Everyone! I realize now that I have friends as well. You don't have to save the world to find meaning in life. Sometimes, all you need is something simple, like someone to take care of. I'll keep on living no matter what, so that I can protect you. Thank you for everything. You must be tired. Please, get some rest. I'll stay right here with you. Soon, all your friends will be here by your side. worry. I will always be by your side, protecting you.
You, the player, then demand a Persona 4 that fixes this ending so you're not dead on the inside. You get your Persona 4, but you're still dead on the inside. It's 8 years later, you're still crying every time you think about it, and oh my god, is this going to be fixed in Persona 5? Please let it be fixed! Next we move on to Persona 3 FES, also known as Chapter Aegis, also known as The Answer, also known as Chapter When Did Yukari Become Such a Bitch? The core gameplay of this side of the game is still the same, but the social link system is gone and your character doesn't attend school. Essentially, this part of the game is just an epilogue to tie up all the loose ends and to fix any questions that you may have. So, The Answer begins on March 13th, and during the opening it is revealed that the protagonist did indeed die. Like, he's dead. Like, dead! The school year has ended and the dorm is about to be shut down for the next school year. They have their final dinner party together where Aegis reveals that she does not intend to go to school next year, instead she's going to go back to Kirijo Labs. After they finish, it is revealed that March 31st is looping on itself, and they are stuck in, well, a time loop. A large door-like object opens up in the floor of the dorm rooms, and out comes Metis, and she begins to attack the party. Aegis defends the party as best as she can, but halfway through the fight, her persona, Athena, suddenly transforms into Orpheus, the main persona of the original protagonist. Turns out she's been given the protagonist's wildcard ability, and she gets the ability to go to the Velvet Room. She manages to subdue Metis, who claims that her actions were only to protect her sister, aka Aegis. So we're going to shorten the storyline a little bit just for timing purposes. So the hole that opened up in the floor of the dorm goes to the Abyss of Time. Now in the Abyss of Time there are all these doors, and each of these doors lead to a multi-floor dungeon. And at the top of these dungeons is how each of the party members awakened their persona. So they make it to the top of the 7th floor. Now at the top of the 7th floor they manage to defeat a shadow version of the protagonist. After this battle, each of the party members are given a key. Now if they were to merge these keys into one, they could go out the front door and stop the time loop. However, Metis then says, you know, you can use these keys to go back in time before the protagonist died. The party then argue and battle over what they should do with the keys, and the keys are then given to Fuka, Metis and Aegis. A little bit after this, they discover an 8th door in the Abyss of Time. They go through this, and it goes to the exact moment where the protagonist became the seal on Nyx. Metis explains the point of the seal was not to seal away Nyx herself, but to stop humanity from creating a monster called Urbus that calls out to Nyx. Humanity's subconscious apparently constantly wishes for death. This is how Urbus is created, and Urbus in turn calls Nyx. The party realise that they are part of humanity, so their subconscious also helped in creating Urbus. They fight Urbus and are able to defeat it. However, Mitsuru pointed out, so long as humanity exists, so will Urbus. The party decide to use the final key to end the time skip. They use the key and go through the front door, and are summoned to the Velvet Room, much to Igor's surprise. It's here that Igor explains that Metis is not real, and she's just a physical manifestation of Aegis's wish to become a robot. After the protagonist died, Aegis decided that she didn't want to live as a human if it meant feeling that much pain. Metis is the separation of the human from the machine in Aegis. After everyone is set free from the Abyss of Time, Aegis decides to continue to go to school and in fact will be Yukari's roommate. Lots of people say Persona 3 FES gives closure on the ending of Persona 3. I disagree. I was crying as I was writing this video.
It's super effective!
So as you might be able to tell by the new colour scheme and lighting, we are now on Persona 4. Fun facts about Persona 4, it actually has two versions, Persona 4 and Persona 4 the Golden. Persona 4 is on the PlayStation 2 and the Golden is on the PlayStation Vita. Persona 4 the Golden officially marks that Persona and the Shin Megami Tensei series are totally separate series now. You can see this by the fact that it is not called Shin Megami Tensei Persona 4 the Golden, but just Persona 4 the Golden. So the original game was released July 2008, but the Golden is considered the canon version, and that was released June 2012. The team that worked on Persona 4 consisted of the team that worked on Persona 3, along with some fans of the series. They wanted to evolve the gameplay and give the player a definite goal right from the beginning, and this would spawn in the form of the murder mystery storyline that Persona 4 is about. I feel like a big difference between Persona 3 and Persona 4 is that in Persona 3 you had the weight of the world on your shoulders, so social links often became a secondary thing to dungeoning. Whereas in Persona 4, you don't really have that whole weight of the world on your shoulders, so you spend more time working on social links and less time in dungeons. Persona 4 is set in the fictional town of Inaba. Now, Inaba is situated in floodplains, and the town only really has a shopping district and a department store, and also only has one high school. There is also a rumour going about the town that if you watch TV on a rainy night with your TV turned off, the Midnight Channel will come on, and the Midnight Channel is supposed to show you who you are going to fall in love with. So April 11th, 2011, the protagonist of this game comes to Inaba to stay with his uncle and cousin for a year while his parents are working abroad. His uncle and cousin are called Ryotaro and Nanako. Just after the protagonist arrives in the town, a TV presenter that was staying in the town to escape a recent affair scandal is found hanging upside down dead from a telephone pole. Various events happen and the protagonist, Chie Satonaka and Yosuke Hanamura, discover the TV world while following the rumours of the Midnight Channel. In the TV world, they meet a being called Teddy who helps them travel to and from the TV world at will. They also have to fight their shadow selves, and after accepting their shadow selves as part of themselves, they gain the ability of Persona. The party realise that the victims are actually the people that appear on the Midnight Channel, so they utilise the Midnight Channel and the TV world to save all the murder victims. People that fight and accept their shadow selves include Yosuke, Chie, Yukiko, Kanji, and Rise. Also, Teddy gets this weird shadow self, but not shadow self, because he's technically not a human, so it's technically not a shadow, but it is his shadow, and he grows a body, and it's really weird, but kind of cute, but really weird. So, a boy from another school called Mitsuo Kubo disappears after the death of Kinshiro Morooka, also known as King Moron. He was the protagonist's homeroom teacher.
Everyone in this room is a whore! Now take your chastity belt and sit down!
Kubo claims credit for all the murders. It is, however, later on found out that Kubo only killed the homeroom teacher and had nothing to do with any of the other murders. Just before this event, Naoto Shirogane, a private detective known as the Detective Prince, begins to investigate these murders, and he is kidnapped himself. The party go into the TV world and save him. As the party battle his shadow self, it is revealed that he is actually a she, and she took the identity of a male to avoid the police's sexism. Events keep building up on one another, and all the events climax when Ryotaro Dojima accuses the protagonist of being behind all the murders. So, while the protagonist is being interrogated at the police station, Nanako is kidnapped. When Dojima finds this out, this causes him to take part in a police chase. The police chase ends when the two cars crash, and the kidnapper escapes through the TV set in the back of his truck. The group tracks down Nanako and the culprit, Taro Namatame, through this heaven dungeon in the TV world, and when they find them, Taro turns into this messiah-like monster after he fuses with a bunch of shadows. The party manage to defeat him, and he and Nanako are taken to the Inaba hospital. Nanako appears to die, and the party are full of anger, so they go up to Namatame's room, and the protagonist has to convince the party not to kill him, because there's no real evidence against him other than this kidnap, and also there is no real motive for him to want to kill anyone. Soon after this, they realize that Ryotaro's assistant, Toru Adachi, is actually behind all the murders. Failure to realize this in time results in the end of the game, Nanako's death is permanent, the fog sets in for good, and humanity dies off. The party confronts Adachi and he runs off into the TV world. Once in the TV world, he explains that the murders were just out of his own boredom and his belief that humanity is better off as shadows. After fighting Adachi, he is possessed by Amino Sagiri, who reveals that the fog is lethal and it will eventually wipe out humanity. The party defeat him and he agrees to lift the fog permanently and congratulates the party on their resolve. Adachi then turns himself in for the murders, and the game moves forward to the day before the protagonist has to go home. You can either end the game here, with the protagonist being sent home, or you can try and identify the unexplained reason for the midnight channel. So at the beginning of the game, there was this gas station attendant who's all like, "Can I touch your hand?"
Hey! I'm a totally unimportant gas station attendant! Can I touch your hand?
So the protagonist confronts this gas station attendant, and she reveals herself to be Izanami, the conductor behind all the events in the game. The cause of the reoccurring fog is a way to merge the TV world with the real world and wipe out humanity. She explains that she did this because it's what humanity wanted. The party go into the TV world to defeat Izanami, but they are actually defeated. Once again, all the social links call out to the protagonist, and he makes a new persona called Izanagi no Okami, and he uses this persona to defeat Izanami very, very easily. By defeating Izanami, the fog in both worlds is permanently lifted, reverting the TV world back to its once peaceful state. The game ends with the party sending off the protagonist and you crying out of joy. However, in Persona 4 Golden, the protagonist actually visits Inaba again much later, and everyone has changed slightly, but their friendship is as strong as ever. Obviously that is a very, very shortened version of Persona 4. In Persona 4 there are actually a ton of social interactions that add to the story. There's so many love options, Teddy has his own little storyline that's really cute. I would go into detail about all of that, but once again I think that would require its own video. I prefer the ending of Persona 4 compared to Persona 3's ending, because in Persona 3 it kind of feels like you were set up for failure, whereas in Persona 4 it's very much a feel-good ending, like you feel like you made a difference in the world and you've personally gained out of it. Now on to Persona 4 Arena, which was released July 26, 2012, and was the first Persona game to continue the main storyline and not be an RPG game. Not so fun fact about this game is that this game was the second ever PS3 game to be region locked. European players had to wait until May 10th, 2013 to be able to play this game. This of course once again was due to a lack of an Atlas European office. Seriously! There is actually a new version of the game in the works called Ultimax Ultra Suplex Hold. Keeping in with the Persona tradition, this second version of the game will actually be the canon version. This second version features new characters and a little bit of new gameplay elements. I also heard there will be gameplay changes to make it a bit more balanced, but I'm not entirely sure about that, so don't quote me on it. The story of Persona 4 Arena starts 2 months after the end of Persona 4 and 3 years after the end of Persona 3 FES. Once again, the setting for this game is in Inaba and the TV world, and this game also features not only the full cast of Persona 4 characters, but some Persona 3 characters, who are much older and much more skilled at using their persona. And when I say much more skilled, I mean much more skilled. Like, Fuka is able to use her persona's ability in broad daylight, not having to rely on the TV world or the midnight hour to be able to use her persona, meaning all that power came from her. The very first story mode that you can play in this game features you, like YU, the Persona 4 protagonist, Chie, Yukiko, and Yosuke. They watch the Midnight Channel after it's obviously supposed to be gone, and they see a trailer for the P1 Grand Prix, which is a tournament that features all of them and their friends. With their friends Risei, Kanji, and Teddy missing, and their friend Naoto not in town, Chie, Yosuke, Yukiko, and Yu decide to head into the TV world and recreate the investigation team. As the tournament goes on, the party hallucinates and thinks each one of the party members is being aggressive against them, and this of course forces them to fight their friends. Meanwhile, a Teddy impersonator called General Teddy is acting as the host for the tournament, and a Risei imposter is acting as like the commentator for all the fights, which means the real Risei is stuck somewhere in the TV world. They also run into Labris, a girl who somehow entered the TV world but doesn't have a persona. The party come to the conclusion that her shadow might be responsible for the tournament. On top of all of this, an unknown entity starts tricking the fighters into thinking that he is their shadows. After defeating all possible opponents, the player actually learns that General Teddy is Labrys's shadow. As per tradition with shadows, it tries to kill the original. As for C's, or the Shadow Operatives as they're now called, well, their story is explored in Mitsuru, Akihiko, Aigis' and Naoto's storyline. So Mitsuru forms the Shadow Operatives 2 years after the events of Persona 3 FES. Her plane is hijacked, and an anti-shadow weapon, Labrys, is taken away in the hijack. Mitsuru and Aigis track her down to Inaba and enter the TV world. They are joined by Akihiko and stalked by Naoto. So the Shadow Operatives become involved in the tournament. And just before meeting Labrys's shadow, Yu and Aigis meet a woman called Elizabeth who wants to test their skill in the wild card. She does this in an attempt to gain new powers so she can save the protagonist from Persona 3. After she leaves the TV world, she gains a full arcana, meaning that she's about to start her own journey, meaning she might be in Persona 5. Next, we learn who the hell Labrys is. Turns out she was actually created by the Korijo lab, and she was forced to fight other robots in her series. She grew close to another robot and was eventually forced to fight her, and upon defeating her, she ran away and then was kidnapped and put to sleep forever. When she ran away, she obviously dealt a lot of damage to the lab, and also in her sleep she would dream about a girl with a Brooklyn accent who her personality is actually modelled after. So, when she was captured and thrown into the TV world, her shadow created the tournament as an attempt to let people know what she felt when she was forced to fight her friends and other robots in her series. Now we make it to the final part of the game, which is called Cliffhanger. So in this part of the game, everyone has to fight Labrys's shadow. And after everyone has fought it and it's been defeated and Labrys fights it herself, she learns to accept it as part of herself and it becomes her persona, Aridine. Everyone prepares to leave the TV world, but then the true mastermind behind everything reveals himself, and he uses Labrys to attack everyone. Fortunately, everyone manages to defeat him, and he runs away as everyone tries to give chase. They don't manage to catch him, and it turns out that his plan was to weaken the persona users' minds to the point that their persona would revert back into shadows. So Mitsuru prepares to investigate everything, and she says to the investigation team, "Forget everything you've seen." And obviously the investigation team are like, yeah, no. Labrys decides to join Mitsuru, and Aigis works with Labrys to help uncover her memories. The investigation team begin working towards the same common goal as Mitsuru, but as 2 independent groups. This of course ends the game and catches us up to where we are now. Will there be another game in the Persona 3, Persona 4 franchise? Or will it just be Persona 3 and Persona 4 and the 2 fighter games? We don't know. I need to know. I mean, I really need to know. I have a mighty need! We know the main theme about Persona 5 is freedom. Personally, I think one of the storylines in Persona 5 is going to be about Elizabeth trying to free the protagonist from Persona 3, but I don't think that will be the core storyline. I don't know. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments down below.
It's super effective!
Okay guys, that is it for today. As always, remember to leave a comment about any part of the Persona games that I have missed that you think I should have mentioned. Also remember to thumbs up this video and subscribe. My name is Faust, and this has been Exploring Video Games, and it is super effective.